because I wanted to start off with the app chain versus the rollup roadmap that Cosmos has versus Ethereum, and just to pick your brains and hear some thoughts about you. I don't know if you saw this Bankless article, if you read it, but maybe you can break it down a little bit on what Cosmos roadmap is in contrast to Ethereum's roadmap, for example, and how it differentiates and what makes it so unique.
Ooh, Zacky's. So if we're talking about Cosmos roadmap, I think Zacky's got a lot of interesting thoughts on this, and he's been working on some things recently that I think he'll probably want to tease. But I think the big difference is in Cosmos, Ethereum has the Ethereum main chain, and their roadmap is really strongly focused around Ethereum main chain and value capture for ETH as an asset. All of the other Ethereum chains are sort of like trying to grab that work, take what they can out of it, and make things that are compatible, but they've never really explicitly had an ecosystem strategy. In Cosmos, we have a Gaia roadmap, which we've got some exciting things. Atom 2021 has needed a refresh for a little while, and Zacky's gotten some extremely talented folks together, and they're working on something really cool. But Cosmos has always also had this ecosystem roadmap where we've been making sure that the open source software works to build hundreds, if not thousands, of different blockchains. And, I think that's probably the big difference between the Cosmos roadmap and the ETH roadmap. Also, the ETH roadmap has been aiming for this migration, and they've gone through a number of different iterations of ideas on how to build blockchains. And have sort of been building for this far out future. We have always in Cosmos taken each piece of the stack, treated it as its own product and with its own customers, and kind of continued to ship new versions in this much more modular sort of ship and iterate architecture that is really the way that software should be built. And it's, how all of the successful Web 2 products were built. So we've tried to mirror that within Cosmos. And I think that our dev effort has actually been a lot more productive with a lot fewer devs in some ways. So that's how I'd kind of differentiate the two roadmaps. Zaki, do you have any thoughts on that?
So if you kind of look at what I do feel in many ways that the Cosmos endgame and the Ethereum endgame are very aligned with each other, but they are coming at a solution space from very different directions, right? One of the biggest things that Ethereum decided to do was, while Ethereum has strongly embraced this roll-up centric architecture, the Ethereum Foundation, for instance, does not make any roll-ups as public goods, right? There is no roll-up framework as a public good in Ethereum. There is all of the roll-up frameworks that exist. You have Optimism, which is probably the closest to building a roll-up framework as a public good, but then you have a bunch of non-public good frameworks like Arbitrum and Starkware and all of these pieces. So one of the sort of the primary sort of we are all coming to the Ethereum and Cosmos have both been coming to this alignment, which is all it is chains and bridges. All there is chains, data availability, and bridges, right? And that's everything in a blockchain comes down to these ideas that you have toolkits for building blockchains and their state machines. You have bridges between blockchains, and then you have how do you ensure that the data on the blockchain was actually published. This is represents the entire sort of design space of blockchains. And so you have these, we are all trying to move to this more modular system of, hey, why don't we allow innovation across all of these three pieces, the bridge piece, the bridge piece, the data availability piece, and the execution layer pieces to all fit together. Probably the biggest thing that has yet to come out of the Ethereum ecosystem is a truly awesome execution layer, whereas a lot of people have been finding the Cosmos SDK to be a great toolkit for building an execution layer. In many ways, also the bridges between these various chains in the Ethereum ecosystem are relatively underdeveloped compared to IBC, which is a rapidly evolving and maturing sort of bridging standard and infrastructure and set of tools. So, what the Ethereum ecosystem has done a great job on is like a relentless focus on data availability, on like building a data availability solution as a public good that is strongly aligned with like sort of core Ethereum.
Speaking of execution layers, one of the big topics this week is Aptos and their execution layer. Zaki, I know you've been involved with that project for a long time, and we've been chatting with them for quite a while. There's also an effort to put Move on Tendermint. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you think about Move competitively with the other VMs in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Move is a potentially, one of the real questions that continues to sort of hang over the blockchain space, right, is the EVM the sort of end state of blockchain execution environments? Almost all the rollups on top of Ethereum, almost all of the blockchain building environments that are out there other than the Cosmos SDK have been targeting the EVM and EVM compatibility and trying to extend the EVM network effects into new domains. But the question has been, well, there's like a lot of challenges with the EVM, right? It's like, the software is difficult to audit. There are good things. There are definitely good things about developer tooling, but as a whole, as a language, it's a Solidity is a particularly challenging thing to work with. And it doesn't give you guarantees that potentially other languages could. It doesn't give you parallelism. It doesn't give you other guarantees. And so you have things like Move. It doesn't give you async. It doesn't give you parallelism. Like all these things make life really challenging. And so what Move is this like extraordinary thing that came out of the like Libra DM research effort and is really truly phenomenal next generation smart contract language. And it's really exciting to see, Move-based chains starting to potentially come and get like a permissionless Move dev environment. And at least my experience working with Move is that it is at least a 10x improvement in sort of developer productivity over Solidity and EVM. So I can see a world in which potentially Move becomes like one of the dominant execution environments in the world. I'm also pretty excited about what Fuel is doing with Sway, which is in many ways somewhat reminiscent of Move. It's sort of a Rust-like, but not Rust itself. Whether or not Rust is I've been long been skeptical that Rust itself is actually a good smart contract language. It seems to be mostly have been adopted because it can target it's designed to target a variety of backends. So you can do WebAssembly, you can do BPF, which is what C-Level uses on Solana, and so you can target all these different potential.
Aren't the programming models with Cosm Wasm and Move fairly similar?
Well, yes and no. Like this resource linearity that like Move guarantees, which is literally like that, like essentially your coin cannot essentially like a program cannot double spend a coin like statically. Like the program cannot make a mistake and think a coin is like in one place when it has to be in another place, right? It's not just even. And so, when you're building things like swaps and vaults and lending protocols and all of these things, Move is going to give you a bunch of guarantees, both at compile time and at runtime, about the correctness of how you are managing assets within your code, that should potentially allow sort of a next generation sort of safe composability. It's a very different approach than the agoric approach, though it achieves like some somewhat similar ends.
And so it sounds like that linear safety that Move guarantees with the assets, agoric tries to achieve the same thing with object capabilities, correct?
and like offer safety, right?
Offer
like
safety.
So like the idea is that like rather than having, so like Move tries to do this at like the language level, like, hey, we're going to enforce a bunch of rules at the language level, and essentially the code won't compile or will throw runtime errors if you try to break these rules. What Agoric says is we're going to have these objects that like everything in the software environment can trust that will enforce a certain set of rules. So like instead of saying, hey, like I'm going to enforce at the language level that like you will only give me, I will only give you foo if you give me bar back. Agoric has an object that will enforce the rules that say I will only give you 10 foo if you give me at least 5 bar back.
Yeah.